What's going on, family? This is Scrapbook Boxing Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. I want to take a look at a Paterson, New Jersey middleweight by the name of Reuben Hurricane Carter. Now, Reuben Hurricane Carter would have a very complex life. He was born May 6, 1937 in Clifton, New Jersey, and he fought out of Paterson, New Jersey. And he unfortunately passed away April 20 of 2014, and he was 76 years of age at the time of his death. He stood 5 foot 8 inches, and he weighed anywhere between 156 to 165 and a half pounds. He was managed by Pat Amato, and he was accused of a bar murder in Paterson, New Jersey in 1966. Now, Reuben Hurricane Carter would not run into the law for the very first time. When he was at the age of 14, it was alleged that him and a couple of buddies were walking around on a lake, and an older gentleman walked up to one of the buddies and he offered him a candy bar. He basically propositioned him. And according to the eyes of Reuben Hurricane Carter, that meant that he was trying to molest him. So he pulled out a pocket watch and he realized what time it was. Then he pulled out a knife. It was to be a pocket knife, a Boy Scout knife, and he shanked him. But little did he know that the older fella would happen to be one of the most powerful politicians in Paterson, New Jersey. And unfortunately for Reuben Hurricane Carter, the Paterson Police Department would be on notice of this incident. And if Reuben Hurricane Carter, and he was told that if he was to spit in the sidewalk, jaywalk, walk the opposite way of a stop sign, he would be arrested. So Reuben Hurricane Carter would go on with his life. And then eventually he would do something and brought him into the courtroom. And the judge sentenced him to 6 years. 6 years. And so out of the 6 years, he did 5 years and 2 months. And then he escaped. And then in 1954, he joined the Army. Now, at the Army, he was serving a 2-year Army. He was serving the Army for 2 years, serving his country. And he wound up becoming the junior welterweight champion of Europe, European junior welterweight champion. He took up boxing and he learned very quickly, and he wound up becoming a junior welterweight champion. And when he got out in 1956, after his 2-year term in the military, shortly after that, Paterson Police Department was notified, and they picked him up, and he had to do the remainder 10 months of his 6-year sentence. So then he turned professional in 1961, and he had his professional debut September 22nd against a fighter by the name of Pike Reed. And he would knock him out. Well, he actually went a 4-round distance with him, but he dropped him one time. And in 1962, he had 12 fights. On October 27th, he would face a fighter by the name of Florentino Fernandez. Now, Florentino Fernandez was a dynamic fighter from Cuba. He was doing very good. He was a prospect, he was an up-and-coming young man. And for Reuben Hurricane Carter to defeat this man in 4 rounds in the fashion in which he did was a shock to the boxing world. But what was happening with Reuben Hurricane Carter, he was actually making the police department take notice of him because his name was becoming very popular in Paterson. So they would go to his fights. They would hang around the bars that he would hang with around in. And he was just setting himself up for a human error to be locked back up again. In 1963, he had 6 fights. And on May 25th, he would face a fighter by the name of Georgie Benton. Now, when he fought Georgie Benton, that was basically it, because everybody knows that Georgie Benton was a phenomenal Philadelphia middleweight. And for him to get that victory, 10-round victory over Georgie Benton. Here's a man who came out of nowhere in the boxing scene. And he's getting these kind of victories that he's getting. He had defeated Harley Mims. He would later knock out in the very first round Emil Griffith, who was a 5-time champion. And it was really starting to make a lot of people nervous. So when he fought Georgie Benton was well respected in the boxing game at this point in time, especially in Philadelphia. And Jersey and Philadelphia always had their little rivalries. And Georgie Benton was known for the Philadelphia shoulder roll. which he taught Meldrick Taylor and Evander Holyfield. So when Georgie Benton's career was over, he had got shot in the foot and he couldn't fight anymore around 1970 or so. He wound up becoming a main event trainer in the main event stable. He was training Rocky Lockridge. And in 1984, he would take over the 1984 Olympic team with fighters such as Tyrell Biggs, Pernell Sweet Pea Whitaker, who was a unified lightweight champion, Meldrick TNT Taylor, who was a junior welterweight champion. I was at that fight when he defeated James Buddy McGirt. McGirt couldn't continue after the 12th round because of a shoulder injury. And Evander Holyfield. Evander Holyfield was an undisputed cruiserweight, undisputed heavyweight. And Georgie Benton was responsible for that. So Georgie Benton had a brilliant boxing mind. So taking it back to Reuben Hurricane Carter, when he defeated Georgie Benton, it was a very shocking moment to the boxing world. So let's take a look at Reuben Hurricane Carter's career. Like I said, he had a very complex life. He was a very good puncher. When he went back to prison, he was doing 1,000 push-ups, 100 a clip, 1,000 sit-ups, 100 a clip. Fascinating specimen was Reuben Hurricane Carter. Let's take a look at his career. Now here you have Reuben Hurricane Carter. As I say, he was born in Clifton, New Jersey, May 6, 1937, but he fought out of Paterson, New Jersey. In 1961, he began his professional debut on September 22nd, placed on a card against a fighter by the name of Pike Reed. He defeated him in 4 rounds. October 11th, Joey Cooper, Reading, Pennsylvania, knocked him out in 2 rounds. October 24th, Frank Nelson, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He would knock him out in 1 round. November 17th, Herschel Jacobs, Totowa, New Jersey. He would defeat him in 4 rounds. Now, in 1961, he had 4 fights, as you can see. 2 knockouts and 2 victories. Fascinating start for a pretty much unknown Reuben Hurricane Carter. 1962, January 19th, he would have 4 fights again that year. He would face Herschel Jacobs in Totowa, New Jersey, lose to him in 6 rounds. February 14th, Tommy Settles, Union City, New Jersey. He would knock him out in 1 round. February 28th, Felix Santiago, Union City, New Jersey. And he would knock him out in 1 round. March 16th, he would face Jimmy McMillan, Jersey City, New Jersey, knock him out in 3 rounds. Now the world started taking notice again in the boxing circles. April 16th, Johnny Tucker, New York, knock him out in 1 round. April 30th, Walter Daniels, New York, knock him out in 2 rounds. May 21st, Sugar Boy Nato, very good fighter, New York, knocked him out in 3 rounds. Now the boxing scene, the promoters, and the matchmakers started investing in Reuben Hurricane Carter because they see an up-and-coming prospect at this point. June 23rd, Ernie Buford. He would face him twice, 23rd of June and the 4th of August. He would face him both times in New York. He would get a 2nd-round knockout. That was August 4th. But he would lose in 8 rounds on June 23rd to Ernest Buford. Now, the thing about fighters, like I told you back in those days, if they lost to you, if you defeated that fighter, he has to have a rematch. He cannot continue without getting that revenge. That's just the way the mark of the man were at that time. There was no negotiating. Let's get in there and get it on. Simple. October 5th, Mel Collins, Jersey City. He would knock him out in 5 rounds. Now, October 27th, he would face a fighter by the name of Florentino Fernandez. He was from Cuba. He fought him in New York and he knocked him out in 1 round. This was a problem for the community of boxing because here you had a man who took out in 1 round. He had the audacity not just to knock him out, but in 1 round. A prospect. Florentino Fernandez was a fascinating fighter. Very strong. Knew how to fight. And he knocked him out in 1 round. That was frightening for the boxing establishment. On December 22nd, Holly Mims, very good fighter, New York, defeated him in 10 rounds. If that wasn't enough, 1963, February 2nd, he would face Gamio Brennan, New York, defeated him in 10 rounds. We got a problem here. This is what the matchmakers and the promoters are saying. Because our whole game plan is screwed up. Here's a young man coming up We know he has a little problem, with his background, but he's defeating all of our fighters. What are we going to do about it? Well, let's put him on another card. On March 30th, he would face Joe Gonzalez in New York. He would be knocked out in 6 rounds. Joe Gonzalez was the ringer. As you can see, it was supposed to be a 10-round match. It was actually an 8-round match, excuse me. But Joe Gonzalez was a 10-round fighter. He was a very good fighter, well experienced, and he knew how to poke holes in his opponents who had holes in their defense, and he was able to stop Ruben Hurricane Carter in 6 rounds. But then October 25th, he would face Joey Archer. Now, Joey Archer would destroy Sugar Ray Robinson's last opportunity of a title shot when he dropped Sugar Ray Robinson. And Sugar Ray Robinson would finish the fight, but they would give the decision to Joey Archer. And his name became bright in lights at that point. And Carter fought him in New York and lost to him in 10 rounds. December 20th, Emil Griffith, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He knocked out Emil Griffith in the very first round. Now that's it. That was it. We can't do this anymore. This is a problem. Now we got to put him in there in the top 10. So February 28th, 1964, he would face Jimmy Ellis, New York. And he would defeat him in 10 rounds. Jimmy Ellis was a sparring partner, a stablemate in the amateurs, and a stablemate in the professionals of Muhammad Ali. And Jimmy Ellis would have the WBA after he defeated Jerry Quarry in a tournament. He would have that championship. And Ruben Hurricane Carter would defeat Jimmy Ellis in 10 rounds in 1964. That's the year Muhammad Ali defeated Sonny Liston and became heavyweight champion of the world. So it shook up that camp on February 28th, 1964. June 24th, 1964, he would face Clarence James, good fighter. Los Angeles, knock him out 1 round. This is a problem. We're having a very, very big problem here. December 14th, Joey Giardello, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Ruben Hurricane Carter gets his title opportunity and loses in 15 rounds for the middleweight championship of the world. Now, this was a very controversial fight because in the movie Hurricane, they had Ruben Hurricane Carter knocking Joey Giardello all over the ring. And then when they showed the real fight, that didn't happen. So the family of Joey Giardello had sued Hollywood, and it was rewarded a very large sum of money for defamation of character and everything else they threw in the book there. 1965, February 12th, Luis Rodriguez, who would be welterweight champion of the world, fought him in New York, and he lost to him in 10 rounds. February 22nd, Fabio Benetti, Paris. He would knock him out in 10 rounds. March 9th and April 20th, he would face the same fighter, Harry Scott, in London. He would knock out Harry Scott in the 9th round, but he would lose to him in 10 rounds. Johnny Torres, Patterson, New Jersey. He would knock him out in 8 rounds. May 20th, Dick Tiger, the Nigerian Tiger, New York. He would lose to him in 10 rounds. Dick Tiger would become middleweight champion and light heavyweight champion of the world. July 14th, Fate Davis. Al Arkin, he would knock him out in 1 round. Luis Rodriguez, August 26th. We're getting another opportunity at him in Los Angeles, lose to him in 10 rounds. And Ruben Hurricane Carter, I'll tell you, if he didn't have any problems that he had with the law, I believe he wouldn't have any problems becoming middleweight champion of the world. I want to show you George Benton. Georgie Benton, like I said, was a phenomenal middleweight. He was the master of the Philadelphia shoulder roll. He would have no problems becoming middleweight champion today. R.I.P. to him. Fascinating fighter. Like I said, he trained Meldrick Taylor. Meldrick Taylor took the title away from Buddy McGirt. It was the IBF Junior Welterweight Championship in Atlantic City. I was at that fight. He would also train Pernell Sweet Pea Whitaker. Whitaker would fight Jose Luis Ramirez, Greg Haugen, Juan Nazario. He would capture those titles. He would fight Julio Cesar Chavez. Just a fascinating fighter was Pernell Whitaker. Great southpaw under the tutelage of Georgie Benton. Meldrick Taylor would face
Julio Cesar Chavez on March 17th, 1990. One of the greatest fights of modern time. And unfortunately for Meldrick Taylor, the same thing would happen to him would be the same thing that happened to Billy Conn against Joe Louis in 1941. In the 12th round, 2 minutes and 58 seconds, he'd be knocked out, as Billy Conn did with Joe Louis. He would be knocked out by Julio Cesar Chavez. It was a controversial count because Richard Steele was the referee that night. The red lights were blinking. Meldrick Taylor was looking at his corner for instructions, as Meldrick Taylor would say in an interview with Larry Merchant. And Richard Steele would stop the fight. So it was very controversial. But he would fight Chavez again. And this time it would be not controversial. He'd be knocked out with Julio Cesar Chavez. He would have Evander Rio de Holyfield. Holyfield would be a unified cruiserweight champion, defeating Ricky Parkey, defeating Muhammad Kawi, Sugar De Leon, just to name a few. Michael Brothers. And then he would be heavyweight champion. We knocked out James Buster Douglas. He would have his wars with Riddick Bowe, Lennox Lewis and others, John Ruiz. And Georgie Benton was responsible for those fights. So salute to Georgie Benton. As you can see here, Joey Giardello. Joey Giardello would become middleweight champion of the world. Fascinating fighter. He's the one that had the controversial fight with Rubin Hurricane Carter in a movie Hurricane. And he wasn't bounced around as the movie says. You know, when you look at the fight film, it was a totally different story. So he was able to win his lawsuit. But he was a fascinating middleweight. I did a profile on Joey Giardello. Type in Joey Giardello, Scrapbook Boxing. You'll learn about Joey Giardello. Here's Gomeo Brennan on the Bahamas. Very good fighter. When he was defeated by Rubin Hurricane Carter, the world took notice. He's been an up-and-coming fighter. Always reminded me of a Michael Nunn facial feature. He's a dynamic fighter. Salute to Gomeo Brennan. And here's Florentino Fernandez. Florentino Fernandez was from Cuba. Fascinating up-and-coming fighter. It was just heartbreaking to know that here's a man who came over from Cuba, fascinating fighter, and got knocked out in the first round. Salute to Rubin Hurricane Carter, absolutely. But it was amazing what happened to Florentino Fernandez that night. So Rubin Hurricane Carter, what can I say? 1985, after doing 22 years in the pen, 20 or 22 years in the pen, he was released in 1985. And then in 1988, Jose Suleiman would give Rubin Hurricane Carter the WBC version of the middleweight championship belt in honor of his falsely being accused back in 1966. So Rubin Hurricane Carter was a fascinating fighter. If he didn't have the issues that he had, reminds me a lot of Mike Tyson, just couldn't get his life together outside the ring. And he was a middleweight as Bernard Hopkins was. But Bernard Hopkins to get time, but not to the extent that Rubin Hurricane Carter did. Rocky Graziano did time. Same thing happened to him. But it's for petty crimes. Then he went into the military to escape going to jail. As soon as he got out, he had to go to jail. As soon as he got out of the military. Same thing Rocky Graziano, excuse me. So Rubin Hurricane Carter, salute to him. I'm going to go ahead and enter him in the Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series based on his life and what he was able to do to overcome it. This is Scrapbook Boxing. Thank you for hanging in there with me. Salute to my subscribers. One love. Peace.